Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Sign up for the newsletter there, and I will never spam you. I send out about one email a month, includes updates or highlights of important issues, so you're going to want to check it out. And Happy New Year. I mean, we are now in 2024. 2024 has kicked off. It's a great start. Given everything going on, this is going to be one of the most pivotal years in our history, and the question is whether America has crossed the Rubicon, and if we are at the point of no return, or whether we are going to start getting back to some semblance of normalcy. You know, I do believe people are starting to open their eyes out there. However, that's not enough. Opening our eyes to what is taking place is not going to be enough. We have to remember who we are as Americans, and we have to bring back an appreciation for American values and principles. We have to restore the American identity. We've witnessed this cultural rot over the last couple of decades, and the only way to restore the American identity is to actually learn about the country, learn about our founders and our founding. We have to understand the system they created and why they created it. We have to have standards, bring standards back into the United States. And only when you really learn about the United States can you gain a true appreciation for our country and the concepts of liberty, freedom, and limited government. We have to stop this DEI movement, the diversity, equity, inclusion nonsense that's turning us into a tribal society where we have different standards for different people based on the color of their skin, based on their ethnicity. It's truly something that our country cannot survive. We can't have a system where people are designated as oppressor or oppressed, where we have this victimhood culture that exists. I mean, we finally have the president of Harvard stepping down after what? A month of proven plagiarism accusations against her? You know, that never would have stood for anyone else in that position, but because of the color of her skin, she got to remain there until the pressure was too great on Harvard and she was forced to resign. This is unacceptable. It's an embarrassment to academia, and I'll write an article about it. But we have to get this country back on track. Like anything else in life, it's not going to be easy. It's difficult, and it takes dedication. It takes hard work. Can it be done? Yeah, the answer is a resounding yes. It can be done. We could get this country back on track. The real question is, do we have the will to get it done? That's the real question. I can't answer that question just yet. Only time is going to tell whether or not we have the will. What I do know is that we continue to commit national suicide through self-inflicted wounds, and it's not just our nation, it's the entire Western world. And to kick off this year, I'm going to talk about three topics. I want to talk about the pro-Palestinian protests that we're witnessing, the military leadership within the Department of Defense, and the Epstein documents that are slated to be released this week. They haven't been released just yet as of this recording, but are we going to learn anything, or is this going to end up being a dud where we all get our expectations up and then no real information comes out? All these topics are important, and they all show where we are going wrong as a nation. That's why it's important. And I want to start off with how I started off my 2024, where I spent an hour in traffic to go 1 friggin' mile because of pro-Palestinian protesters deciding to block off access to JFK Airport, creating this traffic disaster. Now, I'm from New York. I'm used to traffic. I used to travel into the city 2-3 times a week from Long Island. It's not the most pleasant drive in the world, so you get used to traffic. But this was insane, and I am so sick of the public virtue signaling where certain people and groups can spew anti-American and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Those people protesting, they're frauds. But even worse, they truly believe that they have a right to inconvenience everyone else. Now, some of you can try and attack and criticize me. You might call me a snowflake. Oh, you're complaining because you had to sit in an hour of traffic to go 1 mile. Sorry, you're inconvenienced complaining about traffic as people are dying in Gaza. They may call me a hypocrite by screaming that they have the freedom to protest. But these are the same people that shout down speakers and trying to silence anyone who disagrees with them. And also, you have the right to protest. But that does not give you the right to infringe on my liberties, including my freedom of movement. Shutting down major arteries, as we're witnessing throughout the country, highways, major interstates, airports, those do not fall within the boundaries of the First Amendment, which states the right of the people peaceably to assemble. There's nothing peaceful about this. And I don't know if anyone told these morons, but inconveniencing people by bringing traffic to a standstill is not going to endear anyone to your cause. In fact, it's going to have the exact opposite effect. You have all these self-entitled protesters that think that they could do whatever the hell they want because there are no consequences anymore. We don't have leadership anymore. If you had a functional city with real leaders, those city leaders wouldn't tolerate this nonsense. They would shut these protests down immediately. You cannot inhibit the movement of people and goods and services. It has real consequences, including economic consequences, but it's not just about the economics. It's not just about me being inconvenienced and mad that I had to sit in an hour of traffic to go 1 mile. If you actually listen to the chants at some of these protests, what do you hear? You hear anti-Semitic slogans. You hear some people celebrating Hamas. You hear some calling for the genocide of Israel. And those things aggravate me. And while they do aggravate me, what really aggravates me is listening to the anti-American vitriol coming out of some of these protesters. Not for nothing, but if you don't like America, then go live in Gaza. I'll buy you a plane ticket. If we're such a horrible country, then why are you here? You could travel to Gaza if you choose to. You could live there. You're not forced to stay here. Go to Gaza and help the Palestinian people if that's what you care about. Don't sit here screaming at me that it's about innocent Palestinians being slaughtered. Okay, the truth is these protesters, they don't give a damn about the plight of the Palestinians. If they really cared about the treatment of Palestinians, then why didn't we see any of these types of protests between 2006 until 2023, before the Hamas terror attacks? Why didn't we see any protests against Hamas? Hamas has always been brutal and repressive to its own people, to Palestinians. So where are the protests? You know, Palestinians have been suffering under Hamas's reign for nearly 20 years. We're talking about massive human rights abuses. We're talking about billions of dollars in foreign aid, tens of billions of dollars in foreign aid that was meant to improve the lives of Gazans that actually got embezzled by Hamas. And what did they use that money for? Well, they used that money to build tunnels. They used that money to buy military equipment. They used the money to enrich themselves. Where's the outrage that the leadership within Hamas are billionaires? Billionaires, yet they never created anything. They didn't innovate anything. They didn't start a business. They stole money that was meant for the Palestinian people. Where is your outrage there? And we don't see that outrage because most of the protesters are frauds. They don't give a damn about Palestinians. Then you have others who are just ignorant virtue signalers. So go protest that. Okay, protest the barbaric policies and actions of Hamas against the Palestinian people. Why don't you protest in support of the eradication of Hamas? Maybe the Gazans' lives will get better if Hamas wasn't around. You ever think of that? And while you're at it, show some damn appreciation for the United States. We are a great country, and we need to start remembering that. And if you come to this country and you don't appreciate it, then leave. It's as simple as that. You are allowed to leave. We don't keep people in, but they won't do that. Why? Because we are an exceptional nation, and they know that the only place they could preach their nonsense and get away with it is here in the United States. They know the only place that they could grow and thrive is here in the United States, that the place for prosperity is here in the United States. And that's why they're frauds. You travel to this country to escape the conditions of wherever you came from. So don't turn it into those places that you escaped from. That's not a good idea. Okay, if you want to keep the same system that you had, then go live back in that country. But here's the problem. How can we expect those that come here to respect the United States when our leadership shows so little respect for our people and are constantly denigrating this country? How can we expect other people to have respect for the United States? And that's what it comes down to a lot of the times. See, we have an education system that has indoctrinated people with the belief that America is this horrible country. We have a media-industrial complex that continues to push the idea that America is an evil and racist country. We have politicians that are so quick to bash the United States. We have officials in the highest offices of government that view their own people as the real threat that exists to the United States. But it's not really to the United States, it's to their power. So when our leadership shows so little respect for our people and our country, how can we expect others that are coming to the United States to show respect to our country? How can we do that? And I'm going to explain that when we get back from this quick break. When things go sideways, you want to be prepared. Protect you and your family. And people are concerned. They might have to go for a long time without food, electricity. That's why I want to introduce you to 4patriots.com. Get preparedness products you could use now, and that could save your life later. My favorite is 4Patriots' new solar generator, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It uses the endless free power of the sun to power your lights, your TV, medical equipment, even run your fridge. Plus, it's expandable and comes with a free solar panel. Or you can pick up one of 4Patriots' best-selling survival food kits. Delicious tasting and designed to last for 25 years. They even have kits with real meat. And if the power's out, no worries. Just boil water over fire, simmer, and serve. You're going to enjoy a hot meal and stay safe in a crisis. More smart people than ever are finding 4Patriots. Over 2 million customers trust them, and you might have even seen them on TV. I had the folks at 4Patriots set up a special page for you at 4patriots.com/PAS so that listeners of this podcast can see this week's discounts and deals before they go away. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS, but you gotta hurry because the deals don't last long. So save more money, get peace of mind, and protect you and your family. Go to 4patriots.com/PAS. Welcome back, everyone. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you're going to remember this sound clip. I played it at the time. This is retired General and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about white rage and extremism within the military. Take a listen to this.
First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university, and it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military. And I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on that.
He is so pathetic. And this led to a stand-down order issued by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin because our military leaders believed that there was rampant extremism within the ranks of the military, basically accusing those serving, those wearing the uniform, of being radical extremists. Like our army was just being infiltrated by extremist organizations. Take a listen to what the Defense Secretary had to say at the time.
But the truth of the matter is, we need your help. I'm talking, of course, about extremism and extremist ideology, views and conduct that run counter to everything that we believe in, and which can actually tear at the fabric of who we are as an institution. You know, I've seen this before. I've lived through it as a soldier and as a commander. It's not new to our country, and sadly, it's not new to our military. What is new is the speed and the pervasiveness with which extremist ideology can spread today, thanks to social media and the aggressive and organized and emboldened attitude that many of these hate groups and their sympathizers are now applying to their recruitment and to their operation. You know, it concerns me to think that anyone wearing the uniform of a soldier or a sailor, an airman, Marine, or Guardian, or Coast Guardsman would espouse these sorts of beliefs, let alone act on them. But they do. Some of them still do. We've got to be better than that.
Fast forward 3 years. The investigation is done. The report is out. But you haven't heard anything about it. The findings, they're not getting any attention. They don't get the attention they deserve. Why? We're not seeing press conferences, no Capitol Hill testimonies, minimal media coverage. Why? I mean, when they announced this extremism problem within our military, it was wall-to-wall coverage, 24/7. You had testimony on Capitol Hill. You had Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin giving a press conference. But nothing now that the results are out. And it's because the results didn't align with the narrative that they pushed. The military wasn't being overrun by extremists as they claimed. And if we dig into the report on extremism in the military, the lack of attention to these findings is astonishing. Especially, when you consider the gravity of the accusations made against our servicemen and women, those that are wearing the uniform, those that are putting their lives on the line to defend this country. The investigation concluded, but the powers that be don't want to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the military isn't a breeding ground for rampant extremism as they told us. See, the report dispelled a lot of the media frenzy and the claims coming from Secretary Austin's office and General Milley's office. It dispelled all that. The military isn't infested with violent extremists. That when it comes to January 6th, there wasn't a large presence of uniformed soldiers there, or veterans for that matter. The Institute for Defense Analyses, the one that was responsible for the report, found no evidence suggesting that the prevalence of violent extremists in the military is disproportionate to U.S. society. In fact, the analysis found fewer than 100 cases of extremist activity by members of the military. Fewer than 100 cases. Understand that our military is comprised of about 900,000 active duty soldiers and about 1.1 million reservists. And the study actually exposed how all these claims that were made were fraudulent. You had the Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, basically malign and slander our soldiers. And just to get into specifics, all you had to do was look at the court-martials. Okay, so since 2012, there have been fewer than 20 cases of quote-unquote extremist activity. But here's the thing. If you took out gang activity accounted for 19 out of the 20 cases. Okay, not political extremism, not America First extremism, not MAGA extremism. If we took out gang activity, there was only one case that was court-martialed for extremism. And the report concluded that the military, they don't need a new section of the Military Code of Justice to address any type of extremist criminal cases because it is so rare within our military. We have the most professional force on this earth. There's no other force. The report debunks the whole idea of troops, active duty soldiers being involved in January 6th. We've had, about 1,100 arrests, people being charged in January 6th? Well, it turns out fewer than 10 military personnel were arrested. Fewer than 10. There was no evidence that service members were charged in a disproportionate rate than the general population. However, the narrative has been allowed to fester. And what did we do in the process? Well, we kind of destroyed military morale, right? When you're accusing your own soldiers of being violent right-wing extremists, morale is going to take a hit. It's one of the reasons that we see in poll after poll where those currently serving state that they would never advise their children to serve, even though that's been the lifeblood of our military for decades, where it's generational, the service. Well, for the first time, we're seeing that service members and veterans are not encouraging their children to sign up for the military. Well, maybe because our military leadership brands them as extremists, even though they're not. It really is disgraceful when you look at what has taken place. And a RAND survey, which RAND is not a conservative organization, that's for sure, it indicated that support for extremist groups and extremist ideals among veterans is less than the general public. So we now have these reports that actually underlines the strength of the military's culture in preventing members from gravitating toward political fringes. It actually emphasizes that we have a force, a unifying force that transcends race and creed. This is the very story of America. This is the heart of America. So why not come out and do a press conference, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin? Why not explain to the American people that they should follow the conduct of our men and women that wear the uniform. The men and women that serve our military are good people. They deserve our praise. The notion that the military is a breeding ground for domestic terrorism is insulting, to say the least, and it's damaging. So again, we see an area within our government where they've infected the entire workplace with this diversity, equity, inclusion nonsense, and how it has real-world effects, how it has real-world consequences. And it's all based on lies. It's all based on a myth. These officials should step down. They should resign in disgrace. I mean, it's too late for Milley because he already resigned, but he should be called out publicly. And I think that people like General Milley and people like Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin owe the men and women that serve this country day in, day out an apology for maligning them, for slandering them. As I said, we have the most professional force on the face of this earth. Those serving a greater sense than self. It's remarkable, but it reflects the times that we're in here in the United States. And that's part of the problem. Now, when we get back from this quick break, I'm going to talk about the Epstein documents, potential client list, because these topics are all intertwined and they're reflected in the culture of corruption that exists today. So hang tight, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. As I said at the beginning of this podcast episode, that the Epstein documents have not yet been released as of this recording, so when you're listening to it, they may have been released. However, what I do want to do is temper expectations, because the Epstein documents, I don't think much is going to be revealed. There's a lot of speculation that we're going to get all these names, we're going to know exactly who was involved with Epstein Island and who wasn't. I don't think that it's really going to reveal that much, and I do think that there are constantly, we get our hopes up that maybe those in power will be exposed for the abuses that they are guilty of, and then we get let down. So I think that this is going to be another one of those cases. I'm not necessarily just interested in the list of people that may have visited Epstein Island. I want to see bank records. I actually want to see what money changed hands, who was giving money to Jeffrey Epstein. Was Jeffrey Epstein blackmailing officials, taking them to the island, having them engage, letting them engage with all these sexual acts with minors, being pedophiles, and then blackmailing it for him? I think that everyone needs to be exposed that took advantage, that was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, that went to his island, and anyone that provided any type of funding for Jeffrey Epstein's operation. I think that would actually do a lot more. And the reason that this relates to what I was talking about previously is because it shows that the overlords in power, they think that they could do whatever the hell they want, consequences be damned. And up until this point, they're actually kind of right about it. They're never held accountable. They could say and do whatever they want, and they get away with it. They could slander our entire military and get away with it. People want to shut down JFK Airport, they want to shut down the major arteries, and they get away with it. Can't arrest anyone, can't throw them in jail. Why? Because the overlords have done away with bail. And so why even enforce the law? Because of the stupid defund the cops movement. This bail reform movement, that never made any sense. It was always going to hurt the communities they claim to help, but the overlords don't care because they get away with everything. They could make life worse. They could destroy our cities. They could destroy our schools. They could fail constantly for 20 years in military engagements overseas, and yet what happens in the end? Well, they either get promoted, they keep their positions, they go on to sit on corporate boards, they go give speeches making tens of thousands of dollars per speech. It truly is lunacy. And we need to restore accountability within the system, especially when you look at something so egregious as the Jeffrey Epstein issue, where he was taking underage girls, people were engaging in sexual acts with those girls, and those girls are victims. They've been slandered, they've been maligned too, and they deserve justice. We all deserve justice. So when we look at it, the Epstein story doesn't just end with this document dump that's going to be released. There's still much more to uncover. We still don't know the details. Again, you know, the extremism in the military took 3 years for an investigation. 3 years to determine that there was no extremism. I mean, it's something that should have been a 1-week investigation tops. It's an investigation that should have never have happened in the first place. But more importantly, what about the investigation into how Jeffrey Epstein died in a prison cell. When he was on suicide watch, oh yeah, both guards just happened to fall asleep at the same time. The cameras just happened to all go down. They were all defective at the same time. I mean, there are so many unanswered questions, and we demand justice. And the longer that time goes on, it's harder to obtain that justice. We have to search the truth. We have to demand the truth. The only way we're going to cleanse our country of these toxic officials that have done extraordinary damage to the United States is by getting to the truth, exposing them for who they really are, and then getting them out of positions of power. That's the only way. With that being said, I am looking forward to 2024. There's going to be a lot to cover on this podcast. There's so many issues going on. And obviously, we have the presidential campaign that's heating up. You got the primaries that are going to be starting in, less than a week and a half. It really is amazing how quick this has come upon us. And then there's all the unknown variables that exist within our political system today, particularly the presidential race, that nobody could predict how this is all going to play out. So I look forward to discussing it with you and informing the audience. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast episode, please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating and take 30 seconds to write a review on any podcast platform that allows it, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.